Tucked behind golden hills and iron gates, Neverland Ranch was once the ultimate dreamscape, a place where childhood lived forever. With its private zoo, roller coasters, and a full-scale train station, it felt like something out of a fairy tale. But when the music stopped and the gates finally closed, what investigators, filmmakers, and the Jackson estate uncovered was far more complex than fantasy. From dismantled rides to buried truths, the ranch became a stage for innocence, scandal, and legacy. Now, with new revelations and a Hollywood resurrection underway, the truth about Neverland is no longer hiding. And what they found inside changes everything. Opening tease and context. It was more than a house. It was a universe. Set behind iron gates and rolling hills, Neverland Ranch shimmered like something out of a child's dream. Roller coasters twisted through golden grass. A private zoo echoed with the calls of exotic creatures. A movie theater, candy shops, and a full train station invited guests to lose all sense of time. It was a fantasy stitched together by a man who never stopped searching for the childhood he never had. But behind the magic, behind the Peter Pan whimsy and Disneyland sprawl, was something deeper, something darker. And when the gates finally shut, they didn't just close on a home. They sealed in secrets. Rumors festered, truth tangled with myth. And for years the question echoed louder than any scream from the Ferris wheel. What really happened inside Neverland? The story of Neverland is more than one man's dream. It's a mirror, reflecting both the brilliance and the tragedy of Michael Jackson's life. It began with innocence, a place built for joy, laughter, and escape. But it became a crime scene, then a battleground, and finally, a ghost town. In this series, we step through the gates again, not as guests, but as witnesses. We explore what the cameras never showed, what the tabloids got wrong, and what remained long after the spotlight faded. From childhood fantasies turned physical reality to FBI raids and courtroom drama, Neverland became the most controversial private estate in modern pop culture history. Why did Michael build it? What did he hope to escape or to reclaim? And what happened when the illusion began to crack? Inside these gates lie answers not just about a ranch, but about a man the world watched rise, fall, and disappear into legend. What they found inside Neverland Ranch, in dusty rooms, empty rides, abandoned cages, wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was evidence of both beauty and heartbreak, imagination and isolation. And for those who've dared to look closely, it changed everything. Before Michael, Sycamore Valley Ranch. Before it became Neverland, before the laughter, the lights, and the controversy, the land was known as Sycamore Valley Ranch. Its story began quietly, tucked away in the Santa Ynez Valley, far from Los Angeles, but close enough for the rich and restless to find sanctuary. It was 1981 when developer William Bone first saw potential in the 2,700-acre plot. Rolling hills, freshwater lakes, and skies so wide they felt eternal. Bone didn't envision a circus or a playground. He saw peace, elegance, prestige. He designed the main mansion, a 13,000-square-foot home wrapped in white columns and manicured gardens, as a country estate, a place of solitude and sunlight. The lake with its cascading waterfall, the rows of sycamore trees, the quiet hum of wildlife. It wasn't about escape. It was about privacy. Originally imagined as a country club, Bone shifted course. The land didn't want crowds. It wanted reverence. And for a while, it stayed that way, gated, untouched, almost mythic. The mansion stood serene, a beacon for someone who might one day want more than luxury, someone who might want magic. That someone arrived in 1988, when the property caught the eye of a man in search of a dream and a place to bury his wounds. And just like that, the silence of Sycamore Valley would be replaced by the echo of carnival music, train whistles, and children's laughter. But even before the transformation, the land carried a whisper of what was to come. It waited, not for a buyer, but for a builder of fantasy. The ranch had been a blank canvas. Michael Jackson would soon turn it into a living storybook. But stories, no matter how beautiful, always hold shadows. Michael's arrival and transformation. March 1988. Michael Jackson stood at the gates of Sycamore Valley Ranch, not as a pop star, but as a boy in search of a kingdom. He purchased the estate through a trust, and while the exact price remains debated, some say $19.5 million, others closer to $30 million, the emotional cost would prove far higher. He renamed it Neverland, drawing from the Peter Pan myth he had long clung to. This wouldn't just be a home. It would be his lost childhood rebuilt from the ground up. Within months, construction crews transformed the serene ranch into a full-blown wonderland. A Ferris wheel, a carousel, bumper cars, a private zoo stocked with exotic animals. A roller coaster curved past the lake where koi once swam in silence. He built 3 trains, not 1, but 3. The most beloved, the Catherine locomotive, named for his mother, ran along a winding track past statues of children reading, dancing, dreaming. Everything had a purpose. Everything screamed, "This is mine. This is safe." Neverland wasn't for fans. It was for kids. Sick kids, lonely kids, kids from shelters and hospitals. He invited them in droves, giving them the fairy tale he never had. In 1991, Elizabeth Taylor held her wedding there. In 1993, Oprah interviewed Michael on the grounds as deer grazed in the distance. But beneath the fantasy, the whispers had already begun. Was this wonderland a gift or a mask? A refuge or a trap? Still, for a time, Neverland was untouched magic. A living contradiction. Joyful yet eerie, vast yet intimate. It was a place where Michael could rewrite the past, or at least try. Neverland as sanctuary and stage. For much of the 1990s, Neverland Ranch stood as both a private Eden and a public enigma. Cameras rarely entered, but rumors always escaped. Through the gates came children's laughter, and once in a while, the glittering blur of celebrity. Elizabeth Taylor's 1991 wedding there wasn't just glamorous, it was symbolic. The ranch wasn't just Michael's hideaway anymore, it was a Hollywood holy site. And then there was the 1993 Oprah interview. Over 90 million people tuned in as the two sat in a grand living room surrounded by toys and opulence. Michael spoke softly, nervously, about his childhood, his pain, his refusal to grow up. "I never had a childhood," he said. The world nodded. The world sympathized. Neverland, in that moment, made sense. By 1995, it became more than personal refuge. It became a philanthropic center. Jackson hosted the World Children's Congress, opening his gates to kids from across the globe. He wanted the ranch to be a place of healing, of innocence. And for many, it was. But that same year, tabloid headlines turned darker. Critics began asking how many children had visited, how often, where they stayed. the mythos began to fracture. What once seemed whimsical now felt performative. Still, to Michael, Neverland was sacred. His art lived there. His heart was buried beneath its soil. But when a stage is built, it invites an audience. And eventually, it invites scrutiny. The gates remained closed to most, but the eyes of the world were beginning to peek through the cracks. Dark turning point, 2003, raid and trial. Then came the moment everything changed. On November 18, 2003, a full SWAT team rolled up the winding road to Neverland Ranch. Armed with a search warrant and a media frenzy trailing close behind, they descended on Michael's fantasy kingdom like invaders breaching a castle. Over 70 sheriffs, deputies, and FBI agents swarmed the estate. Bedrooms searched, documents seized, private areas exposed. The world watched, stunned. The charges were severe. Gavin Arvizo, a 13-year-old boy once hosted at the ranch, accused Michael of molestation. The press latched on. News vans parked for days. Suddenly, Neverland wasn't magical. It was forensic. The rides stopped spinning. The music stopped playing. Michael stood trial in Santa Barbara County, a circus of celebrity, suspicion, and spectacle. For 4 months, his past, present, and character were dissected on global television. Macaulay Culkin testified in his defense. So did Wade Robson. So did Michael himself. And in June 2005, the jury came back. Not guilty, on all charges. But something had shattered. Michael never returned to Neverland again. It had become tainted. What once stood as a symbol of healing now lay shadowed by scandal. He abandoned it, not just physically, but spiritually. It became a haunted house of memory and media. And as the gates closed for good, the question lingered in the air like fog. Was Neverland ever truly real? Or had it always been an illusion too fragile to last, financial decline and foreclosure threats? After the trial, Neverland sat in eerie silence. No more music from the calliope, no more distant echoes of children laughing on the rides. The gates stayed shut, and so did Michael. But while he stayed away, the bills didn't. Neverland wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a financial black hole. The upkeep of 2,700 acres, 3 train lines, dozens of animals, and over 20 buildings became unsustainable without the man who'd given it life. By 2007, trouble was undeniable. Rumors swirled that Michael was missing payments. In reality, he was drowning in debt. Foreclosure loomed. A notice from Financial Title warned of $24.5 million owed on the property. An auction was scheduled. Neverland was days away from being sold off, not as a whole, but piece by piece. Michael tried to refinance, friends stepped in, but the cracks were visible to everyone. The dream was dying. In 2008, a partial rescue arrived in the form of Colony Capital, an investment firm that paid off the defaulted loan in exchange for ownership control. The ranch's title was quietly transferred to the Sycamore Valley Ranch Company, a chilling echo of its pre-Michael identity. Neverland no longer belonged to its creator. It now belonged to investors, contracts, and balance sheets. Michael, still reeling from legal battles and emotional collapse, watched from afar. "It's not mine anymore," he reportedly said. And maybe it never truly was. The dismantling of Neverland. By 2009, Neverland had gone quiet. But silence didn't mean stillness. What followed was a slow, surgical removal of everything that once made it magic. The Ferris wheel vanished first, then the bumper cars, the carousel, the roller coaster. All sold off, some to traveling fairs like Hellman Sons, others to amusement parks or private collectors. The laughter that once echoed through the hills was now boxed up, shipped out, and replaced by the grinding sound of dismantled bolts. The zoo thinned out. The animals, once lovingly cared for, were relocated. A few llamas remained, their gentle eyes now staring at empty pathways. The movie theater was stripped of its velvet charm. The candy shops closed. Even the statues of children reading and holding hands were removed, as if innocence itself had been exiled. By 2010, it wasn't Neverland anymore. It was Sycamore Valley Ranch once again. The name, restored in cold ink on legal papers, wiped away the fantasy. The property still stood, beautiful and vast, but vacant. Maintained, but lifeless. Trimmed lawns, clean windows, but no soul. What once looked like Disneyland now resembled a billionaire's abandoned summer home, a place no one lived in, and no one truly could. Neverland wasn't just dismantled physically, it was emotionally erased. Post Michael. Death and Estate Aftermath. When Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, the world mourned. But for many, thoughts turned quickly to Neverland. Would it become his final resting place? Would it be turned into a shrine like Graceland? Would fans finally be allowed to walk its paths and say goodbye? But the answer was complicated. Legal permits to bury him on the property never materialized. Logistics and zoning laws made it nearly impossible. And so Michael was laid to rest elsewhere in Forest Lawn Cemetery, far from the gates he once called home. Still, whispers persisted. Some fans claimed they'd seen his spirit there. Others left letters and flowers by the entrance, treating it as sacred ground even in absence. At one point, Lady Gaga expressed interest in purchasing the property, hoping to preserve it as a creative sanctuary. Jermaine Jackson gave interviews imagining what could be done to honor his brother's legacy. But none of it stuck. Bureaucracy, money, and public pressure left Neverland in limbo. The estate was held in trust, tangled in legal red tape. For years, the property sat unused. No tours, no access, just silence. And yet, the myth only grew. To some, it remained a crime scene. To others, a chapel of lost innocence. But either way, it refused to fade from public imagination. Market listing and decline. In 2015, what was once Neverland hit the market. It wasn't called Neverland anymore. The listing called it Sycamore Valley Ranch, and the asking price was staggering. $100 million. The glossy brochure showed aerial shots of the mansion, its pristine lake, the once iconic train station. But to those who knew what it had been, it felt like seeing magic sold in a real estate brochure. The sale didn't go well. There were no serious buyers. By 2016, the price dropped to $67 million. Still, no takers. By 2019, the price dipped again, this time to a desperate $31 million. Fans and family protested. They wanted it preserved, not pawned off. Some dreamed of a museum. Others wanted the gates reopened for pilgrimages. But the owners had different plans. To them, it was land. Nothing more. As the years passed, the mansion and grounds began to deteriorate. Paint peeled, gardens withered, rooms gathered dust. The train station remained, but the tracks no longer ran. There were caretakers, but no caretakers of the spirit that once animated the place. Neverland wasn't just unsold. It was abandoned. And the dream, once so bright, now sat in shadow. new ownership and revival. Then, in December 2020, a quiet headline changed everything. Ronald Burkle, billionaire businessman and longtime Jackson family friend, had purchased the ranch for just $22 million. He called it a land bank opportunity, but to those watching closely, it was a rescue. Burkle began subtle restorations, rebuilding the roads, cleaning the train station, even reintroducing animals to the once empty zoo. It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but something was happening. For the first time in over a decade, Neverland stirred. The 22 buildings on the property still needed work. The movie theater, the guest houses, the train lines, all aged, all fragile. But the heart was being nursed back to life. No one knew exactly what Burkle planned. A private retreat? A museum? A film set? But for now, Neverland was no longer rotting. It was healing. And while its future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. The story wasn't over. Not yet. Filmmaking rebirth. Neverland on screen. In 2024, nearly 2 decades after Michael Jackson last set foot on the property, Neverland Ranch transformed once again. This time, into a film set. For months, camera crews, set designers, and actors poured through its gates, not to reclaim the past, but to reconstruct it for the big screen. The film was simply titled Michael, a sweeping biopic aiming to cover the full arc of Jackson's life, from child prodigy to global icon to tragic controversy. Directed by Antoine Fuqua, written by John Logan, and starring Jackson's own nephew, Jafar Jackson, the production promised something new, a balanced portrayal. No sugarcoating, no sensationalism, just the story, joy, pain, brilliance, and all. Permits were granted for the shoot between April and May 2024. Over 310 crew members arrived, along with a massive team of craftsmen tasked with reconstructing Neverland as it once was. The carousel was rebuilt. So was the Ferris wheel, the petting zoo, even the iconic train station. Not the real thing, but echoes, props, set pieces, cinematic stand-ins. For many involved, walking through those reconstructions was emotional. Some had been there during Neverland's heyday. Others had only heard the myths. Now, they were living inside them. The fantasy was being reimagined, but this time, with clarity. The creative team made it clear. This film wouldn't avoid the controversies. It would walk through them with open eyes, just as it would celebrate the musical genius that made Michael a legend. Neverland was no longer just a place. It was a symbol. And in Michael, that symbol was finally being explored with the complexity it always demanded. The film, Michael 2025 release. Set for release on October 3, 2025, Michael has already sparked global anticipation and debate. The film, spanning decades, aims to capture not just the superstar, but the boy, the dreamer, the builder of Neverland. Jafar Jackson's performance, by early accounts, is hauntingly authentic. He dances like his uncle, yes, but more importantly, he feels like him. Directed with urgency and elegance by Fuqua, and written with emotional precision by Logan, the film includes over 30 songs, countless recreations of key moments, and scenes set inside rebuilt Neverland attractions, a surreal blend of fact and recreation. It doesn't shy away from the 2003 raid, nor does it avoid the 1993 accusations, but it also doesn't let those moments define the man. It's a story of contradiction, pressure, fame, fear, and escape. Neverland is a recurring setting, at first a wonderland, then a prison, then a memory. The goal isn't to absolve or accuse, it's to understand. And in doing so, to remind audiences that no life, especially not one lived in the public eye, is ever just one thing. What's next for Neverland? Now, with the film's release on the horizon, the question resurfaces. What will happen to Neverland? There's talk of turning it into a permanent museum. Others argue it should remain private, a sanctuary free from gawking tourists. Some family members want it preserved as a creative retreat. Some investors see potential for something more commercial, and a few fans, still hurt by the scandals, believe it should be left alone. Producer Graham King, one of the driving forces behind the biopic, has hinted at future projects tied to the ranch. He believes the film will reframe how people see Neverland, not just as the scene of accusation, but as a place of heartbreak, healing, and history. Whatever happens, one thing is certain: Neverland's story continues. It won't be forgotten. Not now, not ever. Because now, the gates may open again, but not for fantasy. This time, they open for reckoning. Closing reflection. Neverland was never just about amusement rides or lavish living. It was a paradox in motion, a kingdom built on dreams and eventually buried under scrutiny. For Michael Jackson, it was refuge, rebellion, recovery, and finally, retreat. It reflected his life, magical and tragic, innocent and complicated, joyful and scarred. Neverland was his masterpiece and his mirror. In its gardens bloomed imagination. In its silence echoed sorrow. Now, as filmmakers rebuild it and the world looks again, we are forced to reckon with what it truly was. A microcosm of a man who tried to outrun pain by building paradise, and who paid the price when reality caught up. The rides are gone. The music has faded. But Neverland still stands. Part memory, part myth, part mystery. Neverland wasn't just a home. It was a mirror, reflecting Michael Jackson's brilliance and brokenness. What they uncovered inside reshaped his legacy forever. Fantasy, fear, beauty, and betrayal. Every piece of it lives on. And now, as the gates creak open once more, the world must decide what Neverland truly meant.